The arrival at Dust Creek. Dust lifted in a red haze as the stage rattled down the main road, wheels shrieking against iron rims. Horses snorted, hooves hammering the hard-packed earth. Dust Creek stood still in its wake, doors swinging open, men leaning out of the saloon, women squinting beneath bonnets. The stage ground to a halt before the general store, leather harnesses creaking. From inside stepped a woman in gray. She moved carefully, not timid but deliberate, as if every step carried weight. Her trunk hit the ground with a dull thud. She pressed one hand on its lid, her fingers pale, scarred, steady. On the porch across the street, Thomas Hale watched from the shade of his hat brim, broad shoulders bent against years of work, jaw set in stone. His daughter, Clara, tugged at his sleeve. "Pa," she whispered. "She looks lost." Hale didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed. The stranger lifted her chin against the stairs, her gaze sweeping the street. Not quick, not nervous, but sharp, measuring. She gathered her skirts in one hand, brushed the dust off with the other, and straightened. "Name's Evelyn Carter," the driver muttered, spitting to the side. "She come alone." Then he cracked his whip, and the stage rattled on, leaving her with the trunk and the silence. A crow called from a sagging hitch rail. Boots scuffed. Murmurs stirred. "Widow," someone muttered. "Looks like trouble," another replied. Evelyn turned and met the whispers head-on, her eyes steady until men looked away, until the hush deepened. Then she gripped her trunk and dragged it toward the edge of town, her skirts catching on splinters of the boardwalk. Clara pulled at Hale's hand again. "Pa!" He finally moved, stepping down from the porch. His spurs rang once, sharp and sure, before his boots settled in the dirt. "Mrs. Carter," he said when he reached her, voice low, carrying weight without effort. She looked up at him, eyes unreadable. "Mr. Hale." Word traveled fast in Dust Creek. She knew his name before he gave it. He nodded once, then bent to lift her trunk with one arm. The weight made his muscles tighten, but he didn't falter. "My girl needs dresses." Hands tear through shirts like they hate the cloth. "You sew." Her lips pressed thin. "I sew." "Then you'll do." He started walking without waiting for her reply. Clara followed at his heel, glancing back at Evelyn. After a moment, Evelyn picked up her skirts and went with them. The ranch spread wide under the late sun, fences running like scar lines across the land. Horses lifted their heads as the three approached, and dust rose soft beneath their steps. Evelyn's eyes lingered on the barn with its sagging roof, the house with paint peeling white as bone. Inside, shadows stretched long across the table. Hale set her trunk down with a heavy thud. Clara clambered into a chair, her feet dangling. Evelyn stood, still holding the folds of her skirt. "You'll have a room at the back," Hale said, his voice clipped, businesslike. "Work steady, pays fair. Supper's at sundown. That's all." He turned toward the kitchen, hands rough against the frame of the door. Clara's small voice followed him. "Pa," he paused. "Can she be my mama?" The words struck like a whip crack in the quiet. Hale's shoulders stiffened. Evelyn's hand slipped against the fabric she held, her knuckles whitening. The silence pressed until even the wind outside seemed to wait. Hale didn't turn. "Eat your supper, Clara." His boots carried him away, floorboards groaning. Clara looked at Evelyn with wide, hopeful eyes. Evelyn forced a small smile, fragile as spun thread. She touched the girl's hair, then withdrew her hand as if the warmth burned. Night fell heavy. Crickets sang beyond the dark windows. Evelyn sat on the edge of her narrow bed, a candle flickering against the wall. She opened her trunk. Thread, needles, scraps of cloth lay neatly inside, beside a folded shawl and a single, well-kept knife. Her fingers rested on the blade, then pulled away. She shut the lid softly, but the metal sound lingered. From the hall came the faint shuffle of Hale's boots, pacing slow, heavy. From Clara's room, a childish hum, half lullaby, half prayer. Evelyn lay back, eyes open to the ceiling beams, listening. By morning, gossip had already bloomed. At the well, women spoke low as she passed, glances sharp under the brims of bonnets. No ring, too young to be worn so thin. What's she running from? On the boardwalk, men leaned on posts, murmuring. Carries herself like a soldier. Hands don't lie. Evelyn kept her chin high, skirts brushing dust, as she carried cloth and needles back to the ranch. Inside, she stitched while the house stayed quiet, each tug of thread pulling tight, steady. Clara sat beside her, swinging her legs, watching every motion. "You sew fast," the girl said. "Practice," Evelyn answered softly. Clara tilted her head. "Do you sing too?" Evelyn hesitated, then hummed, voice low, cracked but warm. A tune from long ago. Clara leaned against her arm, eyes heavy with sleep. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she kept humming, the needle flashing silver in the light. Out on the porch, Hale stood with his arms crossed, listening. His jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, but he did not step inside. He watched until the sun dipped low and shadows reached across the yard. The ranch hands came and went, nodding to her, some polite, others wary. One spat in the dirt, muttering under his breath. Evelyn didn't flinch. By week's end, Clara had a new dress, pale blue with white trim, stitched fine as any store-bought piece. She twirled in the yard, laughter carrying across the fences. "She made it, Pa. She made it for me." Hale only nodded, his eyes betraying nothing. But Evelyn caught the faintest shift in his stance, a looseness in his shoulders, gone as quick as it came. That night, at the supper table, Clara clutched her father's arm. "Pa, don't she belong here?" Hale looked at Evelyn across the lamplight. Shadows carved lines deep in his face. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then he set down his fork, the metal ringing against the plate. "Eat," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes stayed on Evelyn's, searching. She held his gaze, unblinking. Behind her calm, something fierce stirred, something old, hidden in silence. The candle guttered. The room felt close, heavy, as if the walls leaned in to listen. Outside, a lone coyote cried. Dust Creek whispered. A seamstress had come to town, but the air already knew there was more to her than needle and thread. Shadows in Dust Creek. The knife flashed once, clean and sure, splitting the apple skin in a perfect curl. Evelyn's hand moved quick, practiced, as if the blade were part of her. Clara clapped from the table. "Do it again." Evelyn smiled faintly, slid the knife into the sheath at her waist, and pushed the slices toward the girl. Hale, standing in the doorway, watched the motion with eyes that lingered too long. His hands were rough with dirt, but it wasn't work that had him pausing. It was the way the stranger's fingers knew more than needles. Outside, hooves thundered. Dust spiraled. Men rode down the main road, their voices carrying sharp across the town. Silas Crow led them, dark hat pulled low, his grin wide and thin as a knife. Guns rattled on his belt, silver catching the sun. Townsfolk melted back into doorways, shutters closing fast. At the general store, Crow swung down, boots thudding heavy on the planks. His men fanned out, spurs jangling, eyes hungry. The sheriff leaned on his post, chewing slow, saying nothing. Crow laughed, deep and cruel. Dust Creek looks quiet. Let's see how much noise it makes when we start collecting. He flipped a coin, caught it, and pointed down the street. His gang moved like wolves, teeth showing. That afternoon, Clara clutched Evelyn's hand as they walked past the saloon, skirts brushing dust. Laughter spilled from the open doors, harsh and mean. One outlaw leaned against a rail, spit dark in the dirt, eyes settling on Clara. "Pretty little thing," he drawled, stepping forward. Evelyn shifted, pulling Clara behind her. Her voice was steady. "Step aside." The man's grin widened. His hand twitched near his belt, but before leather creaked, steel flashed. Evelyn's knife point pressed against his wrist, quick as a striking snake. A bead of blood welled, bright against skin. Gasps rose. Chairs scraped inside the saloon. The outlaw froze, teeth bared. Evelyn's eyes locked on his, cold, unblinking. After a long breath, she lowered the blade and slid it back beneath her skirt. Clara gripped her tighter, trembling. Evelyn led her past in silence, her back never turning. The town whispered louder that night. "Seamstress don't move like that. Hands too steady. Where'd she learn it?" At the ranch, Hale set a lantern on the table, the flames steady between them. Evelyn stitched a torn shirt, her needle rising and falling in perfect rhythm. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You didn't flinch," he said at last. Her eyes stayed on the cloth. "Should I have? That man would have drawn on you." She tied off the thread, bit it clean. He didn't. The silence thickened. Outside, coyotes called across the dry hills. Clara slept in the next room, her soft breathing drifting through the cracks in the wood. Hale's voice lowered. "You've done more than so." Evelyn lifted her gaze, the lamplight catching the scar along her knuckle. She said nothing, but the quiet told more than words. The days pressed on, tension stretching thin as wire. Evelyn stitched while Clara chattered beside her, laughter spilling like water in a dry place. Yet her eyes kept drifting to the horizon, scanning the hills, waiting. One evening, as the sun bled red over the mesas, Hale and Evelyn rode into town. The street was near empty, doors barred, the air heavy with fear. Crow's men lounged outside the saloon, rifles resting easy, their boots muddying the porch rails. Crow himself stood tall in the street, tossing that silver coin, catching it without looking. When his eyes found Hale, he grinned slow. "Thomas Hale," he drawled, "ain't seen you pay your share yet. Seems you got yourself a ranch worth bleeding." Hale's jaw tightened. His hand stayed near the reins, not his gun. Evelyn sat straight in the saddle, skirts draped, her face unreadable. Crow's gaze flicked to her, lingered. "And who's this? A seamstress? Or something sharper?" His words drew laughter from his men, ugly and raw. Evelyn didn't move, didn't blink. Her stillness was sharper than any retort. Crow's grin faltered a fraction, but he tipped his hat and turned away. "Tribute's due in 3 days. Cattle or coin. Fail me, and your ranch burns." The coin snapped into his palm. His men followed him back into the saloon, doors banging shut, laughter echoing like a threat. The ride home was silent. The only sound was the creak of leather and the steady thump of hooves. Clara met them at the porch, running, her arms wide. Evelyn lifted her down from the saddle, holding her a moment longer than she should. That night, Evelyn sat alone at her small table. The candlelight flickered across her face as she sharpened her knife on a whetstone, slow, steady strokes. The steel whispered with each pass. In the hall, Hale paused, watching. The sound of stone on blade filled the quiet, each scrape a memory rising. Evelyn's eyes never left the knife, but she knew he was there. "You're expecting them," Hale said. Her hand stilled. The blade gleamed in the dim light. "I'm never surprised," she answered. He said nothing more. The floor groaned under his weight as he stepped away, leaving her with a whisper of steel and the dark pressing close. By dawn, Dust Creek already buzzed with rumors. They spoke of the widow who cut a man's hand before he drew, the seamstress who sharpened knives by candlelight. Children peeked from behind fences when she passed. Men tipped hats out of respect or out of fear. Women lowered their voices, whispers following her shadow. And through it all, Evelyn kept sewing. Needle rising, thread pulling, stitch after stitch, binding torn cloth together. Yet each tug of thread seemed tight with something heavier, something waiting. Above the town, vultures wheeled against the white-hot sky. Dust swirled in the wind. Shadows lengthened across the land, stretching from the canyons toward Dust Creek. Everyone felt it. The storm was coming, and the seamstress, quiet, scarred, steady, was at the center of it. The past comes knocking. The fire cracked low in the hearth, shadows twisting across the walls. Hale's voice cut through the stillness. "You carry yourself like someone who's seen killing." Evelyn's hands stilled on the fabric in her lap. The needle hung loose, silver catching the flame. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then she set it down, slow, and looked at him. "I buried a husband," she said. Her voice was flat, but her eyes burned. "He was a Union sharpshooter. He taught me how to steady a hand, how to aim true. When he died, I carried what he left behind." Hale leaned against the mantel, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You left more unsaid than spoken." Evelyn dropped her gaze to the cloth, fingers curling in the fabric. "That's enough for now. Silence pressed between them, broken only by the hiss of the fire. From a back room, Clara shifted in her sleep, murmuring. Evelyn's head turned, softened, then hardened again. Outside, a lone horse rode up slow. Hooves ground against gravel. Hale stepped to the door, hand brushing his rifle. Evelyn followed, silent. A figure loomed in the moonlight. Silas Crow. He didn't dismount. He just sat in the saddle, grinning down. "Evening, Hale," he called. His voice carried oily and smooth. "Word is you've got yourself a new hand at the ranch. Pretty thing, too. Might be she sews more than cloth." Hale's grip tightened on the rifle. Evelyn stepped into the lantern light. Crow's eyes lingered, sharp, searching. His grin widened. "You'll pay in cattle come morning," he said. "Or I'll take more than cattle." He spurred his horse, the animal rearing before it pounded off into the dark. The echo of hooves rolled long after he vanished. Clara woke, crying that night. Evelyn sat beside her bed, smoothing her hair, humming low. The child's small hand clutched her arm until sleep pulled her back under. Evelyn stayed, watching, the tune trembling in her throat. By dawn, word spread fast. Crow's men filled the saloon, drinking hard, laughing louder. The sheriff kept to his office, shades drawn. Folks crossed streets rather than meet their eyes. Hale rode into town for supplies, Evelyn with him. The boardwalk creaked under their boots as they stepped past the swinging doors of the saloon. Crow's laughter rolled out, rough and mocking. Inside, the air stank of whiskey and sweat. Men leaned over cards, pistols heavy on hips. Crow sat at the head of a table, spinning his silver coin, eyes fixed on them. "Well, well," he drawled. "The seamstress walks into my den. I've seen that face before." The coin spun faster, clinking on wood. Evelyn's shoulders tightened. Crow leaned forward. "Years back, Cold Creek. A woman widow riding hard with a rifle, avenging a husband's blood. They called her the widow of Cold Creek. That you?" The saloon went still. Even the piano stopped. Every man's gaze burned into her. Evelyn's eyes held his, unflinching. Names fade. Men forget. Crow grinned, teeth white under the lamplight. "I don't forget. You cost me men. You carved a name into the dirt. I thought you dead. But here you are, sewing dresses." Laughter erupted from his men, harsh and cruel. Crow slammed his palm on the table, coins snapping into silence. "You'll watch Hale's ranch burn before week's end. Then we'll see if the widow still has claws." Evelyn turned without a word, skirts whispering as she moved. Hale followed, jaw locked tight. Behind them, the laughter rose again, louder than before. Back at the ranch, the air felt heavy, pressing close. Hale dropped the supplies on the table with a thud. His voice came rough. "You lied." Evelyn's eyes cut to him, sharp. "I never claimed to be harmless. You brought danger to my door." Her voice cracked like a whip. Danger was already here. "You think Crow wouldn't have come? He smells weakness. That's why he rides free." Hale stared at her, chest heaving. Then Clara's small voice broke through the tension. "Don't fight." She stood in the doorway, her night dress hanging loose, eyes wide and wet. "Please don't fight." Evelyn knelt, arms wrapping around the girl, holding her close. Her voice softened, trembling at the edges. "No fighting, little one. Not tonight." But outside, across the dark horizon, campfires flared on the ridges. Crow's men were gathering, shadows moving like wolves circling prey. Evelyn stood at the window long after Clara slept, the moon silvering her face. Her hand rested against the glass, scar catching the light. Hale came to stand beside her, silent. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said low, "What happens when they come?" Her eyes never left the horizon. "I do what I was made to do." The fire in her voice left no doubt. The widow of Cold Creek was not gone. She had only been waiting. The widow's reckoning. Flames leapt from a barn, sparks clawing at the night sky. Cattle bawled, fences splintered under pounding hooves. Silas Crow's men rode hard through the yard, torches raised high, guns cracking. Evelyn stood in the open, her skirts whipping in the wind, a pistol heavy in her right hand, a knife gleaming in her left. Her eyes fixed on the riders, cold as iron. "Get down," Hale shouted, shoving Clara toward the cellar door. The girl sobbed, clutching his shirt, but he pried her loose and pushed her inside. The door slammed, the bolt dropped. Evelyn stepped forward. The first rider charged, torch lifted. Her pistol barked once. The flames snuffed as he tumbled from the saddle, torch scattering in the dirt. Another raised his rifle. She shifted, squeezed, steel rang, and he toppled sideways, boot caught in the stirrup, body dragged into the dark. Crow's men cursed, firing wild. Bullets tore through shutters, split fence rails. Evelyn moved with the rhythm of memory, each shot precise, each step deliberate. Smoke curled around her like a cloak. Hale burst from the house with his own rifle, firing into the chaos. One man pitched backward, another dropped to the dirt, clutching his chest. The yard filled with gunfire, horses screaming, fire snapping louder as the barn collapsed inward. Crow's voice cut through the din. "Bring me the widow." Alive. His men wheeled, circling her. Evelyn's pistol clicked empty. She dropped it, raised her knife, and in the same breath seized a fallen revolver from the dirt. The weapon kicked hard, flame blinding, and two more men fell before they reached her. A shadow loomed. Crow's right-hand man, broad, scar-faced, swinging a rifle like a club. The butt cracked across her shoulder, driving her to one knee. Pain shot white, but her knife flew from her hand, spinning. It struck deep in his thigh. He roared, staggered, and she was on her feet again, revolver pressed to his chest. One pull, and he crumpled into the dust. Across the yard, Hale fought like a man unchained, rifle but smashing one outlaw's jaw, barrel spitting fire at another. Blood streaked his temple, but he stood unbroken beside her. Then silence fell. Only the crackle of fire and the moan of wounded men remained. Crow rode forward, black horse rearing, his silver coin glinting in the flames. His grin cut wide in the firelight. "Well, there she is," he called, voice smooth as oil. "The widow of Cold Creek, standing in my dirt. You took men from me once. Tonight, I take everything from you." He swung down, spurs striking sparks, pistol already in hand. The circle cleared, eyes watching, breath held. Evelyn faced him, revolver loose at her side, shoulders squared. The firelight painted her scarred hands, her steady eyes. Crow laughed low. "You'll bury another man tonight, widow, just like the last one." Her voice carried, strong, unshaking. "You won't touch him. You won't touch the girl. You end here." The yard held its breath. Crow's coin spun in his fingers, flashing once, twice, then he let it fall. His hand went to his gun. Steel sang. Two shots cracked as one. The sound echoed off the hills, thunder splitting the night. Smoke curled. Crow staggered back, shock carving his face. Blood bloomed across his chest. His pistol slipped from limp fingers, thudding in the dust. Evelyn stood firm, revolver smoking in her grip, eyes locked on him until he fell. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the gang broke. Men scrambled to saddles, spurred hard into the dark, leaving their dead in the dirt. Hooves faded, swallowed by silence. The barn smoldered low, timbers glowing red. The yard reeked of blood and smoke. Hale lowered his rifle, chest heaving. Evelyn dropped her revolver, the weapon thudding heavy at her feet. From the cellar, Clara's voice rose, thin and trembling. "Papa!" Hale rushed to the door, flung it open. Clara scrambled out, running barefoot across the dirt, straight into Evelyn's arms. "You came back," Clara sobbed, clutching her tight. "I knew you would." Evelyn held her close, her face buried in the girl's hair, her breath shuddering. For the first time in years, tears traced her cheeks, cutting lines through the soot. Hale stood over them, eyes heavy, the weight of silence between them. Clara looked up at him, her voice small but clear. "Can she be my mama?" The question hung, soft as a prayer. Hale met Evelyn's eyes. For the first time, he didn't look away. The night hushed, fire crackling low, stars wheeling cold above. Hale knelt, placed his rough hand over Evelyn's where it held the girl. His voice was steady, firm. "She already is." The storyteller's voice fades in the hush of the flames. And so it was that the widow of Cold Creek laid her past to rest in the ashes of Dust Creek. Some say she never touched a gun again. Others swear she kept one hidden, sharp and oiled, till her dying day. But all agree, when the rancher's daughter asked for a mother, the widow answered with steel and stitched a family together in blood and fire.